Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here in my home in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. Hopefully, you all are having a good start to your week. Um, yeah. If you didn't get a chance to watch the videos yesterday, I kind of, I guess it's not the start of the week, it's the middle of the week. What am I thinking? It's Wednesday. So if you saw yesterday, I'm doing a fundraiser for a class that I want to take and raising money for equipment and materials to work on. Um, so yesterday was kind of how I went through. I started with some collage and talking about different glues, and then I talked about the gel press and about different layering techniques. And then we kind of went off a little bit and talked about um, like the artist legacy and how we carry our mentors with through our work. So it was a fun day, a very tiring day, but yeah, here we are today. So if you're watching, say hello and where you're tuning in from. I always like to hear that. And if you are so inclined, if you would like and share our posts, that's always most agreeable to helping spread the word. And hopefully, somebody will see this and they will like it and they will follow along as well. And, it's all about community building, right? I see Marianne's watching. Hi, Marianne. Um, yeah. So I've had a busy day. Um, and part of that was getting the time of my meeting wrong. So I feel kind of bad about that. But I had a meeting and they sent a Zoom link, and the Zoom link was the subject line. And so sometimes when it abbreviates, it like truncates the middle of it. And I saw 10 a.m. and what it cut off was the part that 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And so I showed up at before 10. I was like, where is everybody? And then they're like, oh, the meeting is over. So that was less than great, but I was able to kind of catch up on a recording and talk to different people. So that was awesome. And I'm super excited and about an event that I'm going to be participating in soon. If you didn't know, I am going to be one of the early career artists doing a presentation at the Snag at Touchstone event, which is happening this May. And if you're in the area, I definitely hope you can come, especially if you're interested in like the connection between blacksmithing and jewelry making. I think it will be a really cool kind of event. It's the first time they've ever done it, so I'm kind of it's kind of early days and early days, but not really early because it's next month. But it's still kind of developing and forming, and I think it will be a really cool event. So I'm super excited about that. Um, but if you are in the area, let me know, and I can probably hook you up with a discount code so that you get that early bird kind of discount. Even though the early bird phase is over, I might, I can't wink. I might know somebody who can hook you up with an early bird pricing. So yeah, anyways, Vivian's watching. She says, "Sweet, it's Andrew checking in at work. I have to watch the replay. Looking forward to it." Oh, good. Norma's watching. Hi, Norma. Yeah. So if you are interested in attending the Snag at Touch tournament, let me know, and I might have a discount code for you to save a little bit. It should be a really fun time. And I hope that a lot of people participate in the artist market, um, partially because I have the heart that covets things and wants things. And I think that will be a great opportunity to get some of those things. So, yes. Sometimes, especially with a lot of artists who are kind of in the museum kind of world or the gallery world, they make these big things and they're super expensive, rightly so, but they're not really accessible. But then they'll do these little tiny shows and do demonstrations and presentations and that things like that. And sometimes you can get a little something something. Um, and so I like that idea, you know, because not all of us have the budget for a massive sculpture. You know, sometimes we can afford a little tiny spoon or something, but maybe not an installation piece that needs to be housed in a temperature controlled warehouse. So, um, yeah. So I'm excited about that, and hopefully you are as well. I'm sure that I'll do some check-ins from the event. So if you can't come, I'll try my best to kind of share the experience with y'all, because I like to do that, you know. And so yeah, so most of the morning was spent kind of working with that. And today I thought for the first check-in, I would show you the thing that I was talking about um, last night. So I talked about this and I did this for about half the pieces, but I still need to do it for the other half. And that's kind of doing this kind of preparational work to get some of the kind of base things kind of ready for the next steps. So I thought I would show you all that. Now, if you're like, what? Where's the beads? Where's William? How come he's not showing the beads? Well, this is indirectly involved with the beads, but more tangentially, you know, it's kind of related but separate. So I feel like anything that we can do to improve the equipment access at the cottage, all the better, because then we can do things without having to kind of dance around the logistics of things. So, anyways, um, Marion says, no, but if I had a place and the money, there would be metal sculptures I would love to own. Yeah, I would love to as well, but I think sometimes that's a little bit harder for a lot of like people who don't have the backing of a museum or a collection, you know. There are a lot of artists who I would love to support and get a little piece of their artwork, but it's not really possible. And so I think that also plays into why I like to do these 100 series and these fundraiser series, is because it's a way for people to get a little bit of my work um, without having to break the bank. And you all can feel a part of the community and like you're a part of the rising tide, and like, you know, you're actively invested in our growth and my educational pursuits. And lots of people can participate as opposed to just a few people. So, anyways, Amanda's watching. Hi, Amanda. All of our Canada friends are watching. Well, not all of them, but looks like a good many of our Canada friends are watching. All right, so I'm not going to talk too much today because I plan to do more check-ins throughout the day. So that means that if I talk, I can't necessarily work on the pieces. So I'm going to do my best. And also, I'm at like a cliffhanger part in my Dresden File story. So I kind of want to find out what happens next. So, yeah. All right. So let me flip this around. You're going to see the ceiling for a second. And yeah. If you're working on anything, let me know. I always like to hear about what y'all are working on. I'm going to grab a cup real quick because I forgot to bring a cup. All right. Sorry about that. So here are some of the pieces that I worked on last night. Um, and here are these. I kind of showed these last night in the last check-in. But one of the things I didn't do to these ones is apply the top coat and the gesso to get it kind of ready for the next step. So I'm going to show you that right now. All right, so gesso is pretty straightforward. I like golden. It's kind of my tried and true. They're really good. When I have to work with really big projects, which I haven't done in a long time, I usually get like the Utrecht brand, and it comes in like 1 gallon jugs or buckets. But I haven't had to do that in a long time. When I was in art school, I had a little side gig going where I would stretch canvases, and I did most of that in my little tiny apartment that I was living in. But yeah, so I went through those buckets real quick. Um, but anyway, so I like Golden Brand gesso. It's really good. It's super creamy and it's not super gritty, which I can appreciate. All right, so I've got this, and what I'm gonna do is I have this piece right here, and you can see where I've kind of put these used to be bigger pieces that I cut down, and you can kind of see where I put an X here. So it's just as simple as making an X on the back. And what that does is as it dries, it will kind of pull and contract, and it'll go in the opposite direction. So when you're using your gesso, you want to make sure that it's thoroughly mixed, and then that way nothing kind of separates and it doesn't get any, it doesn't turn it's like a sediment. It's not so much with this brand of gesso, but there are some that I've used where things kind of settle to the bottom. And if you don't mix it up, then you aren't going to get like the full benefit of it. It's not going to be evenly distributed throughout the gesso. And especially if you make your own gesso, you can make your own by finely grinding down eggshells and turning it into like a calcium carbonate mixture, and then adding an emulsifier to it, old school style. But that's kind of a labor of love. And if you're not into it, then if you're not into that, I think it's so much easier just to buy it. Save the eggshells for your gardens and enriching the soil with calcium and all that fun stuff. But if you want to do it, you can do it. It's something that exists. So yeah. All right. Marion says, I got my desert treasures too, as well as a lot of other things, feeling overwhelmed with choice. Oh, good. All right. So I've got this gesso, and I'm just going to make an X on the back of this. And then I'm going to let this dry. I actually have a time lapse video that showed, maybe I'll post that again. But there's a time lapse video that I took where you can actually see the paper moving. Like when you look at it from the naked eye, you may not see it, but over a time lapse, you can definitely see it moving. So I want this to be somewhat thick, but also somewhat even. Now, I will say that if you do this to the back of your piece, you might have an issue with things sticking. So sometimes if if things get hot or damp, then sometimes the acrylic can stick to itself, and that includes the gesso. So when I'm working and I'm stacking them up like this, I only do that if I know that they're super dry. And even then, they're sometimes sticking. For me, it's not the end of the world because I don't work in a very like pristine, controlled way. So it's not like a super big deal if I have to patch something or fill something in. But for people who are working more pristinely or don't want to have to deal with that, put things in between. You can put a piece of wax paper in between. When I was in school, they had this stuff called glassine. It's basically wax paper, but it's more expensive than wax paper. So, yeah, you can also put parchment paper, anything that's going to be nonstick and it's not going to stick on itself. So, if you are concerned about them kind of bonding together, put that in between, and that will help them from bonding. All right. So, the thing about this is you kind of have to let this naturally dry. You don't want to accelerate the drying time because it won't have that full effect of pulling it back and kind of acting right. It will, you want it to dry slowly and let the wonders of evaporation happen so that it can naturally pull itself. Now, the other thing about that is that if you use a hair dryer and you speed it up, if you don't do it evenly, you can kind of create a warp in your paper, and that's not always beneficial. All right. So I'm going to mix up the top coat, and I did this last night for about half of them, but I didn't do the other half because it's starting to get tired. Um, One thing that I will mention about this is that I like to use a small cup to mix things. Um, and it's very intuitively the way that I mix stuff. So it's kind of like the way I cook. People ask me all the time for recipes, and generally I give them a list of ingredients, and it all just depends. For me, it's kind of it's not about like I call it precisely eyeballing things. All right. So that's what I'm going to do with this mixture. I like to mix up small batches because if I make a great big tub of it, what I find is that by the time I get down to the bottom, it becomes super gritty or it starts drying around the edges and then it falls back into the container. And then you have these little crusties and lumpies in it, and that's less than good if you want a smooth and even coverage. So I like to mix small batches, and then that way I can control the thickness and the freshness of it. The one thing I should mention about acrylic paints is sometimes they go bad. And what I mean by that is if you introduce bacteria, since it's water based, it can smell kind of funkadoodle. And if you don't like the smell of kind of spoiled, um, spoiled kind of rottenness, one thing you can do is you can put a drop of ammonia, just a drop, and mix that in. And what that'll do is it'll kill that kind of bacteria that's causing it to smell funky. So if you do that, just be mindful of that. If you're working in an area um, that needs ventilation, make sure you have plenty of ventilation. If you have it in your water, because sometimes the water, if you keep your water for your washing your brushes, it can sometimes make your water smell. So you can put a couple drops of ammonia into the water and it will keep it from smelling. However, if you have cats or anybody who is curious about drinking paint water, then just rinse it out and dump it out each time, um, because you don't want anybody to accidentally get poisoned. Um, So just keep that in mind. Little safety tips. All right. So I've got this matte medium. As you can tell, I need to get some more probably. Um, and so I like this. I like a wide kind of brush for this because then I can use it almost like a shovel. And what I'm doing now is I'm just taking some and dipping it into here. And then, so this is the matte medium. This is Golden Brand. And I like matte medium. I like a nice matte surface, especially if I'm painting on top of it. If it's like a gloss medium, it can it can make it harder to paint on top of. So this has enough of that, whatever makes it matte in there. And you can tell that the paint water, I probably should change out my paint water, but I don't mind this. And when I mix it, you won't be able to tell necessarily that this brush is super dirty and the paint water needs change. All right, so I'm gonna mix one part of this in here. And then I'm also going to mix some of this clear gesso. Now, clear gesso by itself makes a very toothy surface. I like some tooth, but I don't like it to be like sandpaper. And basically, this will make like a sandpaper texture. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need something for it to like really grip onto. But I kind of feel like sometimes too much is too much, right? And as you're working or with your brushes, it can really chew up the surface of your brushes. And I don't really have very expensive brushes, but I want them to last as long as possible. So I don't like it to be too toothy. Um, so I want it to be only like a little toothy. So I'm going to add about an equal measure of what I had for the matte medium. And the matte medium will help cut down that toothiness. Now, I have this, which is, it's a gel gloss and it's thicker. It's kind of like, it's kind of like a toothpaste lotiony consistency. And the reason why I've added that is it's got a little bit of a thickener in it, so it won't be super watery. Now, the other thing that I'm going to get and put in there is this stuff called Chroma Crackle. Usually, this is done for a crackle effect, um, but it also acts as a thickener, and it also will help act as kind of a to make it more matte. And then also to add it matte and to kind of have it be flat is this water-based dead flat varnish. And I'm just going to put maybe a tablespoon of this, maybe not that much. And I can always add more of this if I need it to. And then I want to make sure that this is mixed thoroughly. One thing that's nice about having a dirty brush and that dirty paint water in there is that if I can see streaks of that blue or that bluish gray color, then I know that it's not mixed thoroughly. And you can see it's kind of lumpy. And so you're going to mix that until it's completely smooth and it's going to be completely white. And I make sure to scrape down the sides of my container every once in a while because I don't want there to be kind of that residue of stuff. I want to make sure that everything is thoroughly mixed, that any of those lumps get kind of worked out, and it should be smooth and creamy and kind of be fluffy. Actually, the texture is because we've added that gel medium in there. It will be nice and kind of creamy. And it's a little bit thick. I like that. I don't need it to be like super runny. I like that. So anyways, I'm going to mix this, and I'm also going to scrape down whatever I'm mixing it with. Right now I'm mixing it with a paintbrush, but I'm going to also scrape that down on the side, because sometimes when you're mixing, it can kind of create strata in there, which means layers, and those layers can adhere to the brush or whatever mixing tool you're using, and then you'll have like a streak of unmixed ingredient. And we want to make sure that everything is nice and evenly mixed and thoroughly combined. All right. So you can kind of see it. It's got kind of, it's not gonna super fall down. It's got a nice creaminess to it. If you don't have certain things, you can kind of make do. You can certainly use different products kind of undiluted. I use this mixture for my things because I know how it will react. But sometimes you don't necessarily want to play mad scientists or baker man and testing out recipes. But this is a recipe that I use for my pieces. Now, if you want to be super archival, there is a product that you can use. It's called like a UV resistant, and you can put a little bit of that in this, and that will help keep colors nice and vibrant. However, one thing that I will caution about that is that if you use that, sometimes it can create a cloudy surface on your pieces. So it's almost like the opposite. So with that kind of stuff, you have to apply it in a very specific way where you do very thin, even coats and let things dry completely. And before you add another coat of it, and if you apply it too thickly, it will kind of create this residue and it will look almost scummy. And so that's the opposite of the desired outcome. So I don't want anything that's going to create my artwork and make it look scummy. If it's going to look scummy, it's going to be because I decided to make it look that way, not because the materials I'm using are going to inadvertently act like that. All right. So another thing about this kind of blue gray thing, I know that sounds kind of weird. Um, that I didn't try to fix that. For somebody who's particular as I am, you would think that I would try to fix that. And one thing that bluish gray color will do, which this dirty paint water, I'm almost afraid to show y'all, is that as certain clear products age, they yellow. And so when you're doing laundry and you want your whites to be really white, sometimes they will put this product in called bluing, and it will kind of trick the eye into making making something look brighter and whiter and cleaner and less kind of dingy and yellow. And with some of the resins, like there are these jeweler grade resins, and they make it so that some of it has a little bit of that bluing in it, so that when it ages, that blue counteracts that yellow. Lena says, "Have you tried the golden new formulated waterborne varnish?" No. So I haven't, but I'm always interested in testing it out. They're always coming out with new things, which I think is really cool. And they used to work really closely with artists. So if they needed a certain product, they could help develop that, which I think is really cool. There is an artist named Dorothea Rockburn, and she wanted to experiment with different patinas and stuff. And they worked with her to create these special formulas, which I thought was pretty cool. Anyway, so I've got this. I thoroughly mixed this up, and I've got this flat brush, and I don't want to apply too much, but I'm just gonna go, and I'm gonna go in one direction, and I'm gonna use half of the brush making even strokes. And then when that brush becomes not loaded anymore, then I'm going to flip it over and use the other side of that. And that way I'm making sure that my coats are even and that I kind of use up all of the material on the brush. I don't want to go, and the reason why you do that and you're working in this direction away from that and in thin layers is you don't want to end up with a bunch of goopies on the edge. Sometimes it happens anyways, but um, and also you don't need a ton, um, so that also helps. And you don't want to go back over as I just did that. You don't want to go back over it too much because um it's just a I don't know why. I think it's because it's like that comes from like the varnish world. And if you go over it, you can kind of create this accidental texture. But so, anyways, I cover this in there in this mixture, and this is going to help lock down the previous layers. It's going to help have it build up a tooth for the next layers, and it's going to help me build up these pieces. And it's kind of tedious. It's literally watching, and you can't even watch it because it's transparent, but you're basically watching paint dry. So I guess if you were a fan of Bob Ross back in the day, this might be interesting. But if you're interested in like action adventure, then maybe this is not the solution. Cheryl says, truly enjoying watching you create this week, Andrew. Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. Susan's watching. Hey, Susan. Yeah, I'm pretty much every day I make at least something. I try to make at least one thing um, in this studio. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. But basically, now you can use a wide brush if you want to speed up the coverage, because that sometimes you want to kind of like get it done. One thing I will say about that is, and about this brush too, is that after you do this and you use these varnishes and these coatings, you want to make sure 100% that you wash this brush out thoroughly with warm soapy water. Now, there's a product called the Masters Brush Cleaner that can also be used. What can happen is you can see it right here. Um, these brushes act as like kind of straws. And so it holds all this stuff up in here and kind of towards this the ends, like the top ends of the bristles. I don't know if you can see that. And if you let that dry too hard, you're basically it glues that bottom part, and then the tips are just usable. And over time, it will just turn into this kind of chisel, this plastic chisel that you've created out of a brush. All right. So that's what I'm going to do with the rest of these pieces. I'm going to put these in a dry, a warm area and let them kind of dry naturally. And then I'll check in what time is it now? In theory, I'm supposed to know what time it is. Susan says, I finally got my AG haul. My package made a side trip to Memphis, but finally arrived. Yeah, you never know how the post office will do things. But yeah, I'm glad things are getting out there into the world. So it's a little after 6 right now. So let's meet up at 8. 8 o'clock tonight, and that should give everything a chance to kind of dry out. And then we'll work on the next layers. How about that? So, yeah, hopefully y'all are enjoying this and kind of seeing the behind the scenes. I know a lot of this is kind of like if you're not into this mixed media artwork, or you're not into journaling, or you're not into flat work, it may not be like super exciting, but I think it's good to see it, if anything. For me, I like to be creative in a lot of different ways. I think that the more you work in different things, the more educated you are on how how processes work. Um, there's a wonderful book by Charles Luton Brain, and he talks about the differences between process and tradition. And tradition is wonderful to preserve certain things. It's like that, this is the way you do it, and you should do it. But understanding process is a little bit different, as opposed to kind of doing things by rote. You are understanding them better, and then you can take those kinds of concepts and apply them to other areas. So sometimes things with like tradition is, somebody may have a reason why they did something back in the day, and if somebody just repeats that, then that's cool, but it may not have an actual practical application for what it you know for modern days or whatever you're doing now. So they may be doing it because they had low lighting back in 1700s, and they nowadays you have LEDs, so it's a little bit different. Um, or their conditions could be a certain way. And so if your conditions are different than that, then you have to learn to adapt and change with that. So for me, I think it's good to know these different processes and these different ways of working, so that for your other work, you can take and apply those same kind of principles and concepts and make things your own, but also contributing to the further kind of experimentation of different mediums and methods. So I know for me, I'm not going to live forever. Nobody is. So it's kind of like one of those things where you're troubleshooting, and you have a lab of people who are going to also help you troubleshoot those different ideas and come up with things and solutions that you on your own, it may take a much longer. But when there's lots of people doing it and lots of people experimenting and trying different things and pushing the boundaries, then you have a greater and more rapid rate of success or growth, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like if only one person does all that kind of work, then you may get some dramatic things throughout their life. But if you have a whole collective or group of people doing it, then you can level up a lot faster. So I hope that even if this may not be like your thing, like your jam, you still appreciate these videos. And also, if you do any of these things, that you share your results, and you let us know how you like it. We have a wonderful supportive group. It's called the Allegory Gallery Design Challenge Group. People share the things that they've been making, and I think it's a really valuable community, so that we can kind of all learn and grow together. All right, so yeah. Um, All right. So I'm just going to continue to do this off camera and let them dry. And then I'll see you later. All right. See ya.